John Tavares, a name that sparks pure hatred and betrayal for one particular NHL fan base. For years, Tavares was seen as an icon for the Islanders, the piece that would finally return a once dominant franchise to their glory days. However, despite some fantastic years with the organization and countless efforts to bring the team back to relevancy, ultimately, his time with the Islanders left mixed reviews. NHL players are traded or signed as free agents to new markets all the time, but this particular signing and how it all went down will never be forgotten when discussing the career of Tavares. So today, let's talk about John Tavares and the New York Islanders, and how one choice made him the most hated player to ever play for their organization. NHL free agency is one of the most thrilling times to be a hockey fan, but this 1 year of free agency will forever haunt this NHL fan base, and that's back in 2018 when former first overall pick John Tavares decided to leave the New York Islanders to instead sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he's been playing for the past 7 years. Now, typically this type of resentment isn't held on to very long, but for the New York Islanders fan base, they to this day cannot stand this player. So let's see if there's any justification behind all of this, and see if we can identify the true story behind the split of John Tavares and the New York Islanders. But before we get into all of this, about 90% of the people watching these videos have not subscribed to the channel yet. I have a sub goal of 20,000 subscribers that we are very close to reaching, so if you guys want to continue supporting me and watch more fun hockey content like this, go ahead and hit that like button now and subscribe to the channel. And with all that being said, let's break down the story of John Tavares and the New York Islanders. The early years of John Tavares were a picture of promise. Drafted first overall in 2009, Tavares arrived on Long Island as their savior, a generational talent picked from the OHL Oshawa Generals. His junior career was nothing short of spectacular, and showcased his elite skill, hockey IQ, and leadership qualities that would eventually define his NHL career. Fans saw in him not just a star player, but a cornerstone piece that could bring them a long-awaited Stanley Cup. Tavares delivered on that early promise. His offensive production was remarkable, and he became the face of the franchise almost overnight. He was a consistent point-per-game player, and a leader both on and off the ice. He carried the team through their lean years, and often his performances were the only bright spots when watching their games. He wasn't just a talented scorer, he was a playmaker, a two-way force, and a leader who instilled a sense of belief in a fan base that was starved for success. Tavares managed to lead the Islanders to 3 playoff appearances, but because they lacked talent outside of a few key players, they never managed to gain any traction to make a deep run. Despite multiple 80-point seasons, which at the time were considered league high, the Islanders never managed to surround Tavares with enough talent, leading to what would ultimately be a very tricky contract discussion. The Islanders lived in mediocrity for years, not good enough to compete for a Stanley Cup, and not bad enough to earn themselves a top 10 pick. And when you have a franchise player like Tavares who wants to compete for cups, it makes sense why he started to question his future with the organization. So now free agency is looming, and John Tavares is up for a contract. But little did the Islanders know that he was going to be leaving the organization despite them making all of the right efforts to keep him in town. The summer of 2018, one of the most interesting free agencies of the past decade. Whispers began, rumors swirled, and headlines screamed about a once unimaginable scenario of John Tavares leaving the New York Islanders. Negotiations were tense, they were public, and ultimately unsuccessful. The Islanders, despite offering him a lucrative contract and a commitment to building a winning team, couldn't convince him to stay. At the time, it was reported that New York had offered Tavares an 8-year, $88 million contract. Ultimately, he turned it down. There were rumors about teams like Boston, Tampa Bay, San Jose, and Dallas who all offered similar deals to the Islanders to try and bring in this star center. But ultimately, he decided to take a slight discount on an offer to play for his favorite and hometown team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. John Tavares signed a 7-year, $77 million deal with Toronto, becoming their new franchise player and pairing with stars like Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. John Tavares signing in Toronto was massive at the time. Not only was he the headliner for free agency that year, but also a top 10 player in the league. So are New York Islanders fans justified for hating this player after this free agency event? Well, from what I can gather, John Tavares came out and spoke to the media saying how he wanted to remain a New York Islander and help them build a culture where they could eventually win a Stanley Cup. So the Islanders decided to not trade the player at the deadline and opted to sign him in free agency instead. So once free agency rolled around, they offered him this lucrative deal and he turned it down to the surprise of many, opting to sign with Toronto instead. Now, if I were a fan of the Islanders at the time, this would really make me upset. On one hand, you're losing your franchise player, and at the same time, you're getting nothing in return because he said he wanted to stay with the team. So I can understand why they feel like they were backstabbed in this situation. Had Tavares just come out and said that he didn't want to play for the Islanders anymore and allowed them to trade him for half a season, then the team and the fan base could be in a much better position today than they are based on what actually happened. So is it justified? A little bit, and it seems like the Islanders are not going to be forgetting about this anytime soon, or at least their fan base won't. Since joining the Maple Leafs, Tavares has had moments of success, but the shadow of his departure from Long Island continues to follow him. Every time he returns to UBS Arena, he's met with a chorus of boos, a visceral manifestation of the broken trust and lingering resentment that exists between him and this franchise. The cheers that once existed for this player have grown dark and hateful, and I don't expect things to ever change between this fan base and player. Was his decision to leave New York justifiable? That's the question that will likely continue to fuel debates for years to come. Some argue that he had the right to pursue his own career aspirations, to play for his hometown team while still at the peak of his abilities. Others maintain that he betrayed the fan base that supported him through thick and thin, denying them any real chance to recover from his tenure with the team and eventual absence. Regardless of the justifications, the John Tavares saga is a mark on the history of the New York Islanders. It's a story of immense talent, promise, and a fractured relationship between a player and his loyal fans. A relationship that, despite the passage of time, remains damaged. The cheers have turned to boos, the hope to heartbreak, and the legacy of John Tavares as an Islander is forever intertwined with a lingering sense of disappointment and betrayal. But this is the story of John Tavares and how he became the most hated player by the New York Islanders fan base. Let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. Who do you think was in the right here? Do you think that John Tavares was justified in his decision? And do you think that the New York Islanders are justified in hating him so much even though so much time has passed? Let me know what you think in the comments below as always. Thank you guys so much for watching these videos. Make sure you like this one and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will see you guys in the next one.